Tears flowed freely in some polling stations and in slightly greater volumes than fuel flowed in petrol stations around the country. The UDA party primaries bore all the hallmarks of a typical Kenyan party nomination, with that predictable list of deficiencies. Polling centers opening late, polling materials and officials arriving late, pre-marked ballot papers scattered or discovered here and there, allegations of irregularities, and then, as Francis Gashuri puts it, premium tears. But it was tears of joy for those that had a smooth sailing through what Kenyans call direct tickets, as the party headquarters works hard to place those they consider the best candidates ahead of the election proper on the 9th of August. And after nearly 2 weeks in hiding, Kenyan energy authorities crawled out of the woods to announce the hiking of fuel prices and a crackdown on rogue oil marketers. But where have they been? The memo tonight is a polite reminder to political leaders who have criminal cases. The punchline feels MPs can debate the budget better inside Parliament than on Twitter. The kicker seeks Sheng lessons on hate speech, and the take seeks no further evidence beyond petrol stations that we do indeed live in a cartel country. Good evening. This is NewsGang.
Any entity that is not ready, that is not able, that is not willing to work within the framework of the laws of Kenya is invited to vacate this market promptly.
Wale walikuwa nafikiri ati wanaweza kupanga mimi. Poleni. Hii miaka yangu haikubali mimi nipangwe na mtu yote.
All right, so tulipangwa kwa laini for fuel, wengine wakapangwa at the polling stations with the party primaries. Welcome to the show. Our sign language gangster tonight is Wilson Mushora. So let's get into it and talk about perhaps what might have been a promise of reprieve after 3 weeks of a desperate search for fuel. So Jamila, 3 weeks in a country, what some would imagine, we never thought we would be queuing for fuel. Not for this long anyway.
Exactly. And I was surprised today when the minister said that they thought the issue would resolve itself. And then it didn't. So you wait week 1, week 2, week 3, parts of the country have come to almost a complete standstill, and look at the effects of it. Transport is affected. Goods are affected. Yani shughuli za kawaida. I was even reading on social media that hata kwenda kusaga unga mahindi kuna shida sasa because hakuna mafuta. And then today, of course, the minister comes out and says, oh, we are going to sort this out and all that. But then now, shortly after that, fuel prices go up by almost 10 shillings. So in the next hour and 18 minutes, fuel itakuwa imepanda karibu na shilingi 10. And there's this push and pull between the government and the oil companies, and the fact that some were being sold outside the country, na hatua zitachukuliwa and all that. But why wasn't that done 1 week ago? Yeah, 1 week ago, people have suffered the queues, the traffic jams. Yeah, and okay, you were told that when people hear that something is inaanza kupungua, we all rush there. We were blamed for it at some point. But the truth is that this has come, I think, too little, too late, because we keep talking about this stabilization fund and the fact that it's supposed to protect mwananchi wa kawaida, which is true, because the government shares the costs with the oil marketers so that you're able to at least not pay so much. But we're going to pay a lot of money starting tonight for oil, petrol, and for diesel, and for kerosene. And that's really painful. Consider the fact that we're already struggling with the high cost of goods, milk, unga, mafuta kupikia. And then on top of that, the kerosene prices have gone up. Even ni kama mwananchi wa kawaida anaanza kuangalia saidiwa wapi. Because everywhere you look, things are not looking good, Yvonne, and it's really sad.
Yeah, I mean, and I just, wanted to weigh in on what the prices would actually have been like, because we're talking about the subsidy, that even though, some say this might not be the solution to where we are, but without that subsidy, the price of petrol would have gone at 173 shillings, and the price of diesel would have been at 165, and kerosene would have been at 159.99, which is about about 160 shillings, quite frankly. So the subsidy for petrol was at 29 shillings, for diesel was at 40 shillings, and there was the highest subsidy for kerosene, thankfully, because that's used, you know, for cooking, for many low-income households in the country. The subsidy for fuel, for kerosene is at 46 shillings and 55 cents. That's the highest subsidy for the three products that was given there. But then again, you know, obviously 10 shillings in itself, like you say, Jamila, is a big deal. But Linus, this, you know, we can talk about all the jargon that we want to talk about, you know, that has come up with the fuel crisis. But this is basically, you know, an issue of management and governance. I mean, you know, for the ordinary Kenyans, they don't care about all of those explanations.
It's been a very bad and embarrassing week for the government and the energy authorities because they've been found wanting when petrol stations go empty, not because the shortage is real, but because in its own admission as a government, this has been artificially occasioned by the private oil marketers. Then this is really a huge failure on the part of government because it just basically says that the oil marketers hold so great a sway in the chain of things that the government had no choice. It is until these payments were made, and not once but twice, yeah, that finally we've seen...
Actually once, because they're still owed a balance of about 5 billion.
Yes. Yeah. And this calls to question the arrangement. Will the Ministry of Energy, for example, and there is also the Ministry of Petroleum, be able to tell Kenyans how this kind of situations would be avoided in future? What would stop marketers from causing the same problem in future?
Right.
In fact, I've seen some analysts also starting to question the wisdom of the subsidies. We know the subsidies do protect the consumer, the pump, including ourselves here,
yeah, because
it's 20-something shillings less than you would have paid. But it seems it is your hostage fee. Basically, it's the fee that allows the oil marketers to hold you at ransom. So this has been, and I really hope there are lessons being drawn from this. And I worry about how critical this is. This is a very critical commodity. The economy can crash because
Absolutely.
of shortage of fuel.
That's right.
This is a place where you don't play around with things. But look, it's been a week of shortage of liquids, I think, if we can put it broadly. We don't have fuel. We don't have rain. The meteorological department said there's no rain. Apparently, there's no milk in supermarkets. True. I really hope we still have tears.
It seems there were plenty of tears. That I don't think we will be short of, and we'll get to that in a moment. But, you know, you say an interesting thing. Before we go there, I just want to see if we can talk about the issue that you mentioned, Linus, about this being economic sabotage and the country essentially being held hostage. Can we listen to CS Ambassador Monica Juma, you know, on this issue of economic sabotage?
In my mind, this situation can only be equated to deliberate effort to sabotage this economy, which constitutes a capital crime in our statute books.
So she says capital crime. Is DCI loading?
Well, this evening it was, but the question is, so what? Now that it has been identified as economic sabotage, then there ought to be consequences for that economic sabotage. And those consequences should be so dire such that no one would try to do that again. But will there be action that will be taken? I won't hold my breath that there will be. In any case, Linus talked about the hostage fee.
Yeah.
And so if there's a hostage fee in the form of subsidy, then it also means that those who have held as hostage are well networked within the government circles and everywhere else. So it's like asking for the right hand to take action on the left hand. Is it likely to happen? I highly doubt. And very many people spoke about this situation, that some of the oil marketers were probably waiting for the prices to hike. And surprise, surprise, maybe tomorrow you won't see the queues because the 10 shillings difference is huge enough to make profits. Were people hoarding fuel? Yes, they were. Will the 10 shillings difference make a difference? Yes, it will. So even that action that is meant to be taken, probably it won't. But this also tells us something, that our country is controlled by very few people. Essential commodities are controlled by very few people. Talk about fuel, talk about all commodities, medicine, sugar,
right.
even maize flour that we use every day is controlled by very few people. So these few people, when they can decide to paralyze an entire nation, and so be it. They can decide that things will come to a standstill, and they will. I mean, for 3 weeks, people have really struggled, up to and including today. I mean, there are longer queues and traffic jams of people driving to petrol stations. Essentially, that should not be the case. So you can imagine the amount of man-hours that have been lost as people looked for fuel. You can imagine the amount of frustration. You can even imagine the amount of money that has been spent on panic buying of this fuel, if there is anything like panic buying. And in any case, Yvonne, we don't have enough people who can go to a petrol station and fuel full tank. A majority of our people will drive into a petrol station, fuel 1,000 shillings, 500, because they are, you see, this is also a factor of production. They are using that mode of transport to get to their businesses, make some money, generate some little money. Tomorrow they go to another petrol station. Very few people can afford to go to a petrol station and have a full tank. But you can imagine now many people have been forced to do that. So where did they get the money? So essentially, there's some money that has been spent on that quote-unquote panic buying that ordinarily would have gone to something else. So ours is that kind of a lopsided economy.
Linus?
Let me just add something that I found quite telling in the statement by the Energy CS, Monica Juma. She said, she spoke of companies that are hoarding the fuel, but she did not mention.
Yes, correct.
Not a single one, no name.
10 companies, they said.
Said 10 companies.
Right.
Yeah. Number two, she didn't really explain what actions are being taken against those companies. Late this evening, there were reports by Rubis that the CEO was not deported. He had traveled to France to explain the situation in Kenya. I'm having a bad feeling about these things. I feel like there's not been full disclosure on what is really going on. Could this issue be actually too sensitive, too big for government to be honest about? Because in regular times, if this were the regular criminals, and I remember the president one time saying he'll sign off death sentences for people who are sabotaging, I think it was the railway or scrap metal collection.
Yes.
If these things are at that level where we really feel very strongly about this fuel situation, those companies would have been named and they would have been shamed, at least as a first step before some action is taken. So I'm very skeptical about what we were told today by the CS. In fact, I'm not waiting for more details going forward, except this deportation, which we'll need to see and confirm that it actually happened. You know, growing up in the village, and I like using analogies from our childhood, when a child fell and they were crying and screaming, one of the ways of making them stop crying is to come to the spot where they're fallen and chapa that stone and say, yeah, this is the stone that hurt you. I'm beating these 10 companies that hurt you. We will get down to it.
Yeah, and that was interesting. I just want to quote, that letter you refer to, the statement from Rubis. This is what it said. To clarify that the managing director and CEO upon consultation with Rubis Energy's head office, traveled to Paris to provide a full brief on the situation in Kenya. So he needed to travel to Paris to update on the situation in Kenya. Furthermore, there was no explanation as to how they discovered that Rubis was indeed hoarding fuel and therefore, revoking his permit and, asking him to leave the country. Usually it's, immediate and it's paid for. And also with respect to the investigations surrounding the other 10 oil marketing companies, then, as you say, they were not named. But then again, they're talking about how they're there's show cause letters, but then they're still investigating them. Something about all of this would have required, especially after 3 weeks, like with a full explanation, coming clean, this is what happened, this is where it happened. And did you notice one thing that was interesting throughout this entire time? Throughout the 3 weeks we have had a fuel crisis in the country, the oil marketers have never once spoken on the issue, except for this statement that we've gotten today from Rubis. So it's interesting. The government was the one that was falling all over itself with the different agencies trying to explain what was happening, and the oil marketers were just sitting pretty, saying, okay, we'll let the government, sort of give this statement and see what they say. That just, I don't know for me, but there's a bit of a power play there, right? The oil marketers say nothing, and the government is falling all over itself to give explanations.
And I think something else, Yvonne, that was
for
not...
a whole week. Remember, we have not heard
weeks.
from government.
Yeah.
3 weeks? For a whole week.
Yes, for a whole week.
And I think something else that was not disclosed, Yvonne, is we were told, or some of this company was selling the oil to other countries. Which countries? That has also not been disclosed. Yeah, wamekuwa wakiuza mafuta katika mataifa
mengine. The local
mengine.
transit ratio, 60-40.
Yes. So, nani anapata mafuta? And then now, of course, you're being told, oh, we are going to punish them by reducing the allocation of the oil majors to those companies that, I think those 10, and then increase the volume for those companies that seem to have played ball. Okay.
Slap on the wrist.
Exactly. That's it. That's it. And for how long? 3 months?
So it's essentially you've been a bad boy, so you won't get candy tonight. Right?
Yeah.
Or you'll get one less chapati, and...
I look at it this way. Unfortunately, by now, probably we are immune to heavy talk, threats. We will do, and some things that don't happen. For example, this 60-40 ratio, local transit ratio, I mean, that fuel, when it was being transported to other countries, where was it passing? Our borders, isn't it? Are you not supposed to accompany that fuel with certain documents? This trailer is carrying this amount of fuel destined for this country. So you can tell 60,000, 50,000, 100,000 liters heading to country A or country B. So 3 weeks, we realized today that, oh, the ratio is imbalanced and we will take action. That's why I say I don't hold my breath that a lot of action will be taken. And by the way, the people that we're talking about and the punishment that is being threatened by the government, it is not that guy who owns a petrol station at Osinoni.
No.
Or that guy who owns a petrol station in Banana. No, not them. It's big guys, big boys. And those big boys also have local big boys who they partner with. So that's why I said the right hand threatening to punish the left hand.
Yeah.
I
want us to end this conversation with this assurance from Monica Juma. Let's see. She promises 72 hours?
72 hours.
We are going to allow the movement of tankers on a privileged basis starting later today. And we hope that we can do this in the next 72 hours to stabilize the supply across the country. We have commenced a process of ensuring that the National Oil Corporation of Kenya, NOC, assumes its rightful responsibility of taking up the right quota for strategic reserve to secure this country from hostage-taking.
72 hours indeed. Let's see, it won't be a good Friday, perhaps for many, but we'll see what happens tomorrow with that, and it's something we'll definitely keep talking about. So 72 hours, 3 days.